Hey everyone, have you guys heard the famous quote that is, switching to a secondary weapon is always faster than reloading? And I found that it is true. So I wondered how game developers build this weapon switching mechanic in their games. So I made a very simple weapon switching mechanics for my small game that I will show you guys in this video. To save you from watching the next 3 to 4 minutes of me rambling, just kidding, the key is Animator Override Controllers. If you're an expert, you can probably figure it out faster than it took me to explain it. For the rest of you, let's dive in. So, in my game, I want to swap between melee weapons. You know, the usual, giant battle axe, humble wooden stick for when you're feeling extra merciful, and daggers for, well, stabbing. Obviously, we can't just have our character politely suggesting they're attacking. We need animations. You can use your own, of course, unless you want your character to just stand there menacingly while the enemy dies of sheer boredom. Okay, here's where things get slightly technical, but don't worry, I'll try to keep it simple. We're using the Animator Override Controller, which is basically a fancy way of saying we're going to force this animation to do what we want. It's like training a very stubborn dog, but instead of treats, we use code. So, we're overriding the punch with our weapon attack, because who needs punches when you have a giant axe? In the player's animation system, we have different animations for different actions. The default action, when no weapon is equipped, is punching. This is managed by the animation controller. What we're doing is overriding this default behavior. When a weapon is equipped, we tell the animation controller to play a different animation instead, the attack animation specific to that weapon. This is how we switch from the default punch to weapon-specific attacks. Now, it's time for the coding part. Brace yourselves, we need to swap these animator controllers. It's not rocket science, but it's close. We're essentially telling the game which animations to play when each weapon is equipped. So, let's get coding. And yes, there are weapon walk and jump animations. I couldn't resist. But the weapon's attack animation switching is the important bit. This weapon switch game object holds the switch weapon script, which handles swapping the Animator Override Controller as needed. Let's first look at the components we need for this script to work. We'll need the player's animator component, the player's animator controller, and all the Animator Override controllers. You don't need these speed of player variables, these are for me. However, we do need the weapon booleans. That's everything we need. Now, let's take a look at the code. This script is designed as a singleton, which means we can easily access its variables from any other script in our project, super handy. We have anim, which grabs the player's animator component, and anim controller to hold the player's base animator controller. Then, we have an array to store all our Animator Override controllers, one for each weapon. These variables aren't necessary for this part. But these weapon booleans are important. They're how we trigger the animation swaps. Now, let's look at the onChange weapon function, which is called when the player presses E. Inside, we check each weapon boolean. If, say, WSTrigger, for the wooden stick, is true, we change the player's runtime animator controller to the first element in our array of override controllers, which, conveniently, is the wooden stick's controller. The rest of the code handles things like deactivating the weapon after a short delay, deactivating the weapon prefab itself, and adjusting the player's speed while wielding the weapon. The weapon booleans only become true when the player is in contact with the weapon prefab. Each prefab has a trigger collider and a script. Let's peek at that prefab script. Inside, We use onTriggerEnter 2D and onTriggerExit 2D to toggle the weapon booleans, in this example, the BattleAxe trigger boolean. The update function checks this boolean, which turns true if the player pressed E while in contact with the weapon's trigger collider, and if so, deactivates the prefab. All the weapon prefabs use a similar script, just with different weapon booleans. Boom! Weapon switching, conquered. Now you're armed with the knowledge to create the most epic weapon systems imaginable. Go wild! Create a swordfish that shoots swords. A mace made of marshmallows. The possibilities are endless. And if you get stuck, or if you just want to tell me how awesome this tutorial was, the comments section is waiting. And thank you for watching. See ya in next video.